I recently read an article about how single women with children were increasingly facing homelessness in Queensland, Australia, where the rising costs of accommodation are forcing people out of their homes and onto the streets. It narrated the story of a woman who says that the rent in her area has tripled, and that had forced her to consider moving into a motor home, so she wouldn't be bound to live in shady areas with other homeless people. She says that even that wasn't possible for her, because motorhomes had become quite expensive over time. She then recounted how her marriage had broken down and she had ended up living on government support and her family to provide for her 2 sons. According to a report, prefabricated housing is one of the quick fixes the government was considering. They've also increased the amount of the rental security subsidy. For people like this homeless woman with children who could actually secure up to $10,000 over the course of a year to maintain her current rental or secure another rental, the government says they're building as much as they can as quickly as possible. The state government pledged last year to construct 6,365 new social housing units by 2025, but the research claims that this won't be enough to meet demand, leading to an increase in the number of single women with children staying in tents, automobiles, motels, etc. Since women voted for the governments that brought about this mess, I don't care that single women with children are suffering from rising rents. In Australia, the real estate bubble and other asset bubbles were caused by governments lowering interest rates to make housing more affordable for buyers. This led to an increase in housing prices because most people don't actually buy homes. Instead, they buy mortgage payments, which they max out and buy the biggest house, because they will have to move out of or be evicted from their current apartments and must now find new accommodations at higher market prices. Poor old single women with children will be hit the hardest if real estate prices crash as a result of the increase in interest rates. They will either have to move far away and find a new job or keep their current job and find alternative housing arrangements. The woman who was interviewed in the article rented some self-storage space for her belongings, but very soon, self-storage will be the main place for her to stay because it will get impossible to afford any other thing. So, people have to increasingly move out of urban areas and live in rural areas near farms and small towns in order to survive. Today, people are moving from crowded cities and settling down in rural or isolated areas where they can afford better housing and live in more spacious houses. After the pandemic, especially when working remotely became a normal thing to do, many have already moved back to rural areas with basic internet connections and the availability of electricity in order to live more peaceful lives. And it's not just in Australia where there really isn't a lot of room for rural housing expansion. It's also in other countries, especially the US and Europe. People move to reduce their costs of living, such as utilities and transport, and be safe from viral pandemics such as COVID-19, which are far more likely to have outbreaks in crowded cities. So now, it is easier for single women with children from rural areas to target men who have moved to rural areas for a more peaceful living. This is where men will need to stay vigilant and not be manipulated into marriage with these women, because they will come on strong and push for marriage and the adoption of their children. Relationships, wherever they may be, are all about power and control. Women tend to use the notions of love to keep men in their control. Having kids with these women allows them to use men's resources more openly and to their advantage. And women are very mysterious when it comes to their resources. I have yet to meet a woman who is generous with what she earns or has inherited. And yet, they expect men to work hard all their lives and just hand over the money to these women. Men are now realizing this and not giving in to this manipulation as much as they used to in the past. Men have had enough of the tests and the games and have been burnt far too often to know what women truly want. Yet there are men who are still far from this, which is why women still continue doing this even today. Blue pill guys who don't have strong willpower are easily seduced because women find out their weaknesses and exploit them. A woman who's really great in bed will always be a weakness for weak men. Men need to realize that the hour of pleasure they have in the bedroom is not unconditional. The woman you're dating or are supposed to marry is only doing that so she can get your resources in the long term to finance her life and fuel her material and societal wants. She's using you for the social value of being married to someone stable, to make a network of friends or potential future suitable partners in case this goes wrong, and to have access to funds that allows her decent food, designer handbags, and vehicles. Also, men in rural areas might be strong physically, but they are not as intellectually refined as men in the cities. This is probably why rural men fall for rural women all the time in their early years and get into marriage and have kids, only to go for a divorce when they later find out the manipulative side of women. Men in cities who move to rural areas know better, and that is why women go for such guys in the first place, because they know if they manipulate them once, then they're probably intellectually superior to those men, and then they can push them towards marriage and a stable life with someone earning from a city job that pays much more than someone working in a farm. For such men, what starts as a simple move to the rural areas in search of some peace and quiet turns into a marriage that swiftly becomes a case of adoption, of them having to share their resources with a single rural woman with children, and eventually divorce. Women are known to live and thrive in packs. So even if rural women who move to the city get into a relationship with men, they eventually try to persuade them to move back to their rural areas so that the women can be closer to their circle and community of women. That makes it easier for the women to manipulate and control their men when they have their tribe of single women with children around them to constantly tell them what to do next. They can then also be closer to their own families, where they can use their influence in the area through their brothers and fathers. Women from the countryside and rural areas are somehow easier to get along with. They don't have the tendency to be shrewd as most city women do. Hence, guys usually find it easier to talk to and be with women from the country. But you can't take the female nature out of them. They might seem like the long-term commitment sort, but they use that to eventually manipulate men the same way a woman from the city would, even before marriage. That's also because rural girls aren't as educated as girls from the city. This is why country girls seem much simpler, easier to understand and get along with. Country girls don't commonly go to universities to get their higher education. That's something that's fairly common with city girls. Also, going back a couple of decades, women in rural areas didn't have satellite television or even an internet connection. Their access to popular culture was much less than it is today. This meant that they were less influenced by other women or shows that gave women the knowledge to manipulate men for their own wishes. Also, religion was a lot more prevalent in rural areas when compared to cities. So they had all the more reasons to settle down early in life, get married, and have children. Another important point is that women can have a bigger social circle when they're married. Single women don't hang our married women. Married women don't hang around with single women because they're scared they'll seduce their husbands. And when single women look at single women with children, it scares them and pushes them to not have kids because they don't want to give up their lives and have that sort of responsibility on their shoulders. In the city, things are a little different. For example, a single woman with children will have a harder time bonding with other single women without children because she won't have as much time on her hands as them. Although in the cities, these social norms are not as rigid as they are in the rural areas. Married couples will still hang out with single men and women, and vice versa. Single women are afraid of becoming single women with children in the cities because that will devastate their social lives, which is something that women base their self-esteem on most of the time. Single women with children in rural areas are shunned in their communities, so they move to the big cities. That's just a dynamic that has been at play since the last decade. Gentlemen, I hope you understand these dynamics before you venture into a relationship with a country girl. I hope you understand these factors when your woman pushes you to move from the city to her farm in the Midwest. As for Australia, there isn't a lot of hope for single women with children because they're the ones who voted for a government that is now increasing housing prices and will soon make it impossible for them to live in comfortable housing in cities such as Melbourne. Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.